So, welcome to a special edition of HuffPost Live. We're here in Boston at the Old South Meeting House, which is the birthplace of the actual Tea Party, the real one.
The real one.
So I'll be your host. I'm Ryan Grimm of the Huffington Post, and I'm joined here by two people who have written books that have surged to the top of Amazon, New York Times bestseller list. The first one, Capital in the 21st Century, by Professor Thomas Piketty. The second by Senator Elizabeth Warren, A Fighting Chance. Senator Warren's book makes the case that the system is rigged on behalf of the rich and against the middle class. All right, how's this? All right. Fortunately, I won't be doing much of the talking. These two are going to be doing most of it. Professor Piketty's book makes the same case as Senator Elizabeth Warren's does, except he makes the empirical point that this has been happening for 250 or more years. So, Senator Warren, I actually want to start with you and ask you, tell us what you made of Capital.
Okay, so I will get to describe your book in front of you. I like this. So I saw it as a book that had a pretty straightforward thesis. The rich get richer and everybody else gets poorer. That kind of says what this book is about. And what Dr. Piketty has done is drawn the data together to show how this has happened across countries, across time. And I have to say, the first thing I thought when I read this book, or one of the first things, is I thought George Bush Sr. was right. Remember when he called trickle-down economics voodoo economics? Dr. Piketty assembled a lot of data to show that, in fact, wealth does not trickle down, it trickles up. It trickles from everyone else to those who are rich. And he demonstrates with his data that it keeps happening, as I said, over time and over country.
Does that sound about right?
Well, that's one possible outcome, but there's nothing inexorable or there's nothing natural in there. It really depends on a set of forces. It depends on the institutions that we choose. It depends on our policies, not only in the fiscal domain, but also, education. The diffusion of education and knowledge can be a powerful force pushing toward a reduction in inequality, both between countries and also within countries, assuming everybody has access to the skills, the jobs, and so, educational institution in the labor market, minimum wages, is part of what can make a difference. Right now, the real value of the minimum wage at the federal level in the US is less than what it was in the 1960s, which is quite peculiar that, a country half a century later has a lower real minimum wage. And of course, taxation of income, inherited wealth, which to a large extent was invented in this country, tax progressivity, can make a difference. So all these different forces, education, social institution, taxation can and sometime in the past, have been able to produce different outcomes, again, particularly in this country.
But going to your point about whether or not this is inexorable, whether or not it has to be this way, I think it's 2 points that are made simultaneously. It's why I started with the question about trickle-down economics. Because I think the myth behind trickle-down economics was that if we let the rich retain more of their wealth, somehow that's going to flow down to everyone else and it will make us all wealthier. And so I read the first part of this message as that's just simply not true. It doesn't work that way. It's not like gravity, that somehow if we hold it up here, it will trickle down over time. But that the second point is also powerfully true. What happens in the distribution of wealth over time depends importantly on the government, on the policies that any government follows that can either make this problem a a better problem, that we can get more equality in an economy, or that we make it a worse problem and exacerbate.
And we took a lot of questions from the public here, and actually a lot of questions were about this particular issue and specifically on taxation. So I wanted to read one here from this is from a Move On member, as a matter of fact, Lars from Georgia. Lars wants to know, how do you propose to convince more wealthy people that taxing themselves at a fair rate is actually in their own interests as well as ours?
Okay, so the difference between taxation and voluntary giving is that for taxation, in principle, it takes a majority to take decision, and not everybody has to agree. So, that's the short answer, is that, if you wait for, each single individual to be willing to pay more tax, of course, that can take a long time. But
however, we're not exactly one person, one vote here anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So what?
Not in a post-Citizens
right.
United world.
No, that's the biggest danger with rising inequality, is that at the end it creates rising access to political voice, political power, and this can make it even more difficult. But at the same time, we have better information technologies, better opportunities to spread information and to have new forms of political mobilization than ever. So I think I'm not as pessimistic as what a number of people seem to be after they've read my book, and I feel really sad that some people were depressed apparently after they've seen that. And I think there's room for reasonable optimism as well.
But your question about how you persuade people that they should pay more taxes if they already have a great deal. I think part of this, though, goes to the question of the integrity of the tax system itself. A world in which anyone, rich or of moderate means, looks left, looks right, and says, wait a minute, that guy gets a tax loophole, that guy gets to move his property overseas and doesn't get taxed on it, this guy gets a break for moving jobs overseas, that one over there gets a special deal. The cost of that is not just a cost in dollars, it's a cost in integrity in the system. And when people feel like we're not all in this together, we're not all sharing, we're not all paying a fair share of our income or our wealth, then I think that what you get is you get this sort of, it all comes unraveled. Mm-hmm. Everyone moves toward, I will pay the least because he's paying the least. He's cheating, so that means there's no reason for me to go ahead and be scrupulous about what I pay. So I think partly this is about, we're at a moment in American history that our tax system has become so riddled with loopholes. You talk to small business owners pay and pay and pay on taxes. They pay because the loopholes aren't as available to them. But you look at Fortune 500 companies that are profitable and end up paying zero in taxes. When that happens, the cost is more than the dollars. The cost is the integrity of the system and the sense that we're all in this together. And so the first place for me that we have to start this is we have to clean up the tax system we've got. That has to be the first step. Yeah.
So speaking of integrity and the power of big money, you've recently been on the receiving end of some of that power. So I think apparently a lot of people are familiar with this row with the Financial Times. You rebutted this week. Basically, they said he made some math errors. It turned out that the Financial Times just simply didn't understand how to do the equations. So even after that was pointed out, though, they followed up with this, and I want to read you their follow-up and get your reaction to it. This is Chris Giles writing. He said, "Further debate on many of these items is difficult because Professor Piketty accepts he makes still undocumented adjustments to his data. The sources he has appear to be secondary to Professor Piketty's prior expectations of what the data needs to show." Now, beyond that being an incredibly unself-aware statement, how would you respond to it? And do you plan to respond, or do you think this is over?
I mean, to me, this particular debate is over. But what's not over is, the quest for more transparency about income and wealth. And what I take from this debate is two things. First,